everyone. My name is Liz Talbert, and I'm the Executive Director at the Alliance for Safe Kids. I'd like to welcome you to #WalkTheTalk's fourth webinar Wednesday. Tonight's webinar is A Journey from Addiction to Recovery, and will be presented by Stephanie Mahoney and Ean Szalan. Both Stephanie and Ean are recovery coaches with the Mountainside Treatment Center, and each will be sharing their personal journey along with coping skills and more. But before I turn things over to them, I'd like to share a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded and will be emailed to you along with some additional information from Ask shortly after this evening's presentation. And immediately following the webinar, you will be redirected to a quick survey, and that will help us in planning future presentations. So I would ask that you just please take a few moments to complete it. The chat room that you see on the right side of your screen is currently set to public, but as soon as the presentation begins, it will be set to private, and you may add whatever questions you have there. Stephanie and Ean will be happy to answer all questions toward the end of the webinar. And now I have the pleasure of introducing Stephanie Mahoney and Ean Szalan.
Hello, good evening, everybody. My name is Ean Szalan. This is Stephanie Mahoney. We both are recovery coaches at Mountainside. So I'm going to share my story first from addiction to recovery. So I was born in Trumbull, Connecticut. My childhood growing up was pretty normal. I lived with my grandmother, my mother, and my grandfather. My father wasn't in the picture, but I really had a good relationship with my grandfather, and I was able to grow up pretty normal and kind of get all the things that I really wanted. At a young age, I started to manipulate my family by, if I didn't get something from my mom, I would go to my grandma. If I didn't get something from my grandma, I'd go to my mom. I'd go to my grandpa. I'd really just get whatever I wanted. And now looking back on that, and as my recovery process has gone further, I've been able to see that I was manipulating at a young age. So, as time went on, I went through elementary school, everything was okay. I got to middle school. I got into a lot of skateboarding and hanging out with some kids who did that. And by 7th grade, I ended up trying marijuana for the first time. I was at my friend's house. His brother, he was a little bit older, and I tried marijuana and I drank alcohol for the first time. It didn't really do anything to me, the marijuana, the first time I did it. But I noticed shortly after that the people that I did try it with didn't continue to do it. They kind of stopped and was okay, I had tried it one time, but I continued to kind of look for that a little bit later down the road. That's when I started to really get in trouble with the school systems too, 7th, 8th grade, skipping school, to smoke marijuana into freshman year, and continuing to go down that pathway. That resulted in me getting suspended really from freshman year of high school. I got suspended. I was I played lacrosse, I played soccer, I played football. I was really big into sports before I started smoking on a daily basis. And those were things that gave me a sense of purpose. And later down the line, you'll see when I talk about purpose, that's really what I live for now. So those things gave me a really good sense of purpose, and I enjoyed them, but marijuana got in the way of that. I couldn't do those activities without wanting to smoke before. And that's just how it went for a couple of years. And so when I was in high school, I was a freshman, and, I got in trouble smoking marijuana at school. They suspended me for a period of time, and then I got suspended off of all those teams. And, they saw that I wasn't really doing well in normal high school. So I got sent to an alternate school that was more for people who used substances and had mental health. So I went to that school. I was, at that school for probably the rest of my time. Through my high school, I tried many substances. I continued to be defiant towards any type of authority figure. I didn't want to listen to anybody. I feel like a lot of it, had to do, I've learned now a lot of it had to do that I was never really reprimanded like as a kid, even like yelled at or anything. Cause like my mother tried to be my father and my mother, but like she really couldn't, like I wouldn't take her seriously. And I was kind of just like, I'm going to do whatever I want to do. For example, when she would be like, okay, you're going to get grounded. You're grounded for the night. I'd be like, no. And I would just go out anyway. I really didn't care about what she said. And, that resulted in me not really caring about any type of consequences that came my way, as a result of me being defiant or continuing to, not go to class or get suspended. So like I went to this alternate school, at a young age, around like 16, like while I was in high school, my mom kind of started to realize like pretty soon that like I started to have a problem with substances, and she was like, really didn't know what to do. So like I went to like rehab, my first rehab when I was like 16. And, I went to a place in New York. It's called Arms Acres. I was in the adolescent unit there. I was 16. I really didn't know what to expect going in there. I spent 21 days in there. And to be honest, when I came out, I really, at that young of an age and at the substances I was doing, which was just marijuana and alcohol, I really did learn about a lot other drugs in there. And I ended up, coming out and trying other things. And then was like back in the same rehab, like 3 months later, spent my 17th birthday in there. And, for the next couple of years of my life, like that's kind of what it was like. I was just in and out of, treatment centers. I didn't really take anything seriously. I didn't care about myself. I didn't care about anyone around me. I just wanted to like be around people who used, any type of substances and that drank alcohol, and I wanted to party. I wasn't looking at college. I wasn't looking at anything. I literally just woke up every day and wanted to do that. And it took over my life. And then I got to a point where, I did get sent to this one rehab, right after high school. I actually didn't end up finishing high school, but I went to this rehab and I got my GED at that rehab and I finished, and I was like really happy that I did that. But I still, like, throughout this whole time, I never really wanted to do it like for myself, right? Like I had always went away for like my mom or maybe my girlfriend at the time or whoever it was. I didn't have like that willingness to be like, I want to do this on my own, like for me to better my life. And, I didn't really get that until the age of like 22. I got out of that rehab where I got my GED and I looked at my life and I was like, I can continue to do what I want. Or I could go down a path where like I could maybe go to college and do things like that. And every time I was in those places, I never really like did any work on myself. Like I just went through the motions. I continued to like not really care about the consequences I was getting. And I just didn't really care about anything in general. So I was like, okay, like I hung out with the same friends that I did every single time I came out of rehab before. And maybe I would stay good for a week. Maybe I'd stay good for 2 weeks, maybe a month. And it came to a point where like eventually something happened in my life where I didn't know how to handle it. And I ended up just going back to like what I was used to, right? Which was drugs or alcohol. And that was my solution at the time. As I know now, that is a very temporary solution and a very unhealthy solution, but it was the only solution I knew at the time. And because my childhood growing up, like I said, like my family was there, but like, my grandpa was at work, my grandma was at work, my mom was trying to provide for me by herself. And so I didn't really I didn't feel like I ever talked about what was going on. If there was anything wrong, I kind of just like stuffed it deep inside me and just was like, okay, like I'll deal with it later. I'll deal with it later. And then I feel like that is really what pushed me, at the time I didn't know it. It was definitely very subconscious in me, but like, that's definitely a reason why I went towards drugs and alcohol too. It was definitely because of the friend group I was hanging out with and all that too. There was many circumstances that came into play, and it wasn't like my mom didn't try along the way to like really like help me. But at this point, at the point I was at, I was only able, like, you know, I can only help myself. So like, you know, I at 22 years old, I ended up going to a treatment center for a long period of time. I went for almost 2 years. They talked about a lot of like support groups I can go to. And just as a recovery coach now, I can give you guys multiple like support groups. There's like AA or NA meetings. Those are like the most common. There's Refuge Recovery, which is more of a Buddhist approach, and more of a meditation meeting. There's Smart Recovery. There's many treatment centers now, including Mountainside, has many different type of virtual support groups going on. I believe that like COVID has really opened the door on that, and like, you know, people can go and they don't have to like worry about like being viewed or being judged. Like they don't have to even turn their camera on or talk the whole time, talk at all. They can just mute themselves and listen. So I think that's like a really big plus to that. But so like I got out of treatment, right? I had tried to do it my own way every other time that I tried to get out. Like I just said, I went back to the same friends, the same places, and I continued to try and do it my own way. Like whether the problem was marijuana and I decided to just drink, or the problem was other substances and I decided to just do marijuana, I ended up still where my life was getting out of control. Not that it got out of control right away. And that's what I had to eventually learn, that like, but it gets out of control eventually, right? And like, I'm not willing to take that risk anymore for it to get to that point of eventually. That's just for me. So, you know, like I came out and like I had really tried every other pathway I had thought at the time, and like AA was kind of the only pathway that I didn't try, so that I really like dove into that. And I continued to try and like, you know, put my ego to the side and be like, you know, I don't know everything, because if I knew everything, I wouldn't be in the place that I'm in. I wouldn't have just went to all those rehabs. I would have been able to deal with what I need to deal with, right? When I was in those in that last treatment, I really like, after the drugs and alcohol lifted, like I finally was able to look at my life and be like, what do I want from this? And it was like one of the first times that I really cared about what I wanted. And I was like, okay, if I didn't use drugs and alcohol, then I wouldn't be in these places over and over again, right? So like, of course, it's pretty simple. Like you think about that and you're like, okay, let's just not use drugs and alcohol. But it was like I had to put the work in to get to the point where I didn't want to use drugs and alcohol. And for me, that was like doing a lot of like putting my ego to the side and really opening up to other people and telling them what was going on. And like when situations that occurred that I used to use over, I would call someone, or I would take a run. You know, these are the coping skills that Liz was talking about. Like these are the things that have worked for me. Like I've listened to some music that really calms me down from like childhood that I really liked, right? I put a movie on that reminds me of like being at home and like during the holidays, and it really gives me a sense of comfort. Like these are the things that I do even still today when I get in situations where I feel anxiety or I get uncomfortable, right? Like I do things that I know that work. So to be able to get to those things, we have to try many different things, right? So like being in recovery, it's like I had to try like all these coping skills that were laid out in front of me, and that had people had told me that worked for them. Was my ego big? And I was like, oh, that's not going to work for me. Of course, I definitely fought it along the way, but I listened, and I eventually ended up doing it. Like I'm the type of person that usually like to feel a little bit of pain before I make a decision, but I ended up like following those suggestions and following what was laid out in front of me at the time. So like a lot of those coping skills can be like meditation. Like Stephanie's big on meditation. You know, meditation, taking a walk. Like I got a dog, taking the dog for a walk, just having that responsibility. I'm still like really big into skateboarding today. And like, I'm able to do that as like a sober man and not have to like, you know, view it as I viewed it back then. That got me into like sort of that like phase of using. So, you know, as my life went on, I I got out of that treatment center and I started to do these things that I'm telling you that I did. And I really started to, when I got in situations that I didn't know how to handle, I would pick up the phone and I would call other people that are like in those meetings that I went to, or other people that I knew that were sober, and like really connect with them and just tell them what was going on so that they could help me through that process. Because I know if I was left to my own devices and I wanted to try it alone, it didn't work out and every other time. So why would it work out this time? I really just like surrendered. And that was hard for me to do. And it took a while for me to do. So, as my years were moving forward in recovery, I've learned a lot of things. I've been through a lot of things, and I've also developed like a pretty good, like, mental, spiritual pathway, and, practice that on like more of like a daily basis type thing. And like, I continue to try and help like someone else. And like, so my path, for at least we can talk about like my career for a little bit, or even just like a job right away. Like, I had to really humble myself and be like, okay, like right now I don't have a car. So like, I'm going to have to take the bus to my job. And like, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to have to like be seen doing that by people I knew, but like, I did it because I knew that I needed to do things that I didn't want to do. Right. I had to get uncomfortable to get comfortable. And I preach that all the time. Like, it's just like riding a bike, right? Like, the first time you do it, you're uncomfortable, but the more and more you do it, the more comfortable you get. And like, I use that analogy and I bring it into many different areas of my life. So like, I started to do that and like take the bus to work and really like take jobs that I knew that I wasn't going to stay in, but I knew I had to like take stepping stones to get to the place that I wanted to get to. And I continue to do that. And a lot of the jobs that I've gotten along the way is because I've been open enough to talk to people about what I want to do in like a recovery standpoint, in a recovery way. And they've like either worked at a place or knew people that did, that kind of put me in touch with them. And I was able to like go on those interviews and really know what I'm talking about and learn like many different ways on communicating and recovery oriented like language and stuff like that. And also like being able to like eventually go back to school and like finish like a certification that I'm doing to like be a drug and alcohol counselor. Like, all those things would have never happened if I didn't have that moment of like where I went to treatment for that long period of time. And I was able to finally, like, the drugs and alcohol had finally been lifted. And I was like, okay, like now I get to really like look at like what I want to do. And like, my family had been there for me that whole way. Like, they never gave up on me. Like, don't get me wrong. My mom didn't enable me. She shut the door on me a lot. She kicked me out of the house. Like, she did what she needed to do to protect herself. And I hold no resentment towards her at all. So with my career, like, and jobs, like, things really ended up working out just because I knew that like I was going to continue to get to a place that I wanted to get to, because I was motivated, because I came from a place of where I wasn't motivated at all and didn't care about my life. And then with like family, I mean, just the aspect of family, like my mom used to like text me and be like, hey, like, are you alive? And like, that's really what it was. Like, I'm just going to be fully forward and blunt about it. And like, I would answer and be like, yeah, I'm alive. But like, our relationship went from that to literally like her calling me and asking me for advice now on like things that she's going through. Like, our relationship being so tight that like nothing can come between that. And like, that's what like family's about, I think, and it's awesome to like see how in the 7 years that I have, a little over 7 years in recovery now, and I did it at a young age. Like, I did it at 22, that's pretty young. So from 22 to 29, I've been able to stay completely abstinent off drugs and alcohol. And like, I feel like I had to go through the stuff that I had to go through to get to the place that I had to get to. And like, it wasn't like my family didn't try to help me like along the way. Like, they really did. They pushed me to go to rehab a bunch of times, but I just wasn't ready. Like, I just wasn't willing enough to do that on my own. And when I finally was, I really was like, okay, I'm going to do it this time. And like, I didn't even really talk about it. I just did. I acted on it, because like, I'm a big believer on like actions matching words. Like, I want to be that person. I want to be like a man of integrity and a man that says that does what he says. You know, and so like for me, I feel like, you know, it wasn't a lot of like what my family didn't do. You know, they were there for me a lot. Like I said, they worked a little bit, but they worked all the time, but it wasn't like they weren't there for me. Like, I just, in my own way, just wanted to push things down inside because I didn't feel comfortable talking about them, because I thought, like, as a man, like, that men don't cry. Men, like, you know, you grow up and you kind of are like, oh, you have to be like hard and not soft and not just like emotional, you know? So like, I had always thought that in my mind. So I was like, okay, like, I'm not going to open up about these things that might be bothering me because I don't want to be viewed as that. But the best part about it now is, like, I've gotten past that part. In the beginning, like, I had that fear of judgment, right? I had that fear of like what people thought about me. But now I know who I am so much that I don't have that fear anymore, and I can literally care less what people think about me, because I know that I try the best that I do every day. And like, I'm in a profession where I want to help people like on a daily basis. And like, that's something that gives me a sense of purpose. Like, I feel good when I wake up in the morning and like, I'm going to go help somebody do something so that they can reach their goals in life, because like, I was able to do that on my own somewhat, but with the help of other people. But having someone like, as like a recovery coach like me and Stephanie are, we really get to like be on the front lines with them and like help them through those tough times that they're going through. And like, they have somebody else that they can relate with on like the things they're going through in life. You know, and it's a cool role, because I don't have to be in an office all the time. I can be out and like go on hikes with people and stuff like that. So you know, I'm going to stop now because Stephanie's going to go. But like Liz said, if you guys have any questions, like, you can write them throughout while we're talking. And then at the end, we'll be able to answer them when she's done. So thank you guys for letting me come on and talk. I hope you guys got something out of my share. And if you have any questions at the end, you can ask me and Stephanie. So here you go.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Stephanie Mahoney. You know, my story is very, very different from Ean's. I think, you know, everyone's story is different. Everyone comes from a different background. Everyone has different skin color. Everyone has a different socioeconomic background. Everybody has, you know, different parenting styles that they grew up with. But it really doesn't matter. Addiction doesn't discriminate in any way. And I think growing up, I had this, you know, vision of what I thought addiction was, and addicts were, alcoholics were, and it was people who lived under a bridge and people who were, you know, on the side of the street, and the homeless people that you would see holding up the sign next to the highway to like asking for money. Like, that is what I affiliated being an addict with and being an alcoholic. And that was actually such a detriment to me throughout my stories, because I wasn't like that, and because I was so functional, I didn't think I had a problem. So, you know, I grew up in Long Island, New York. I have an older brother, 2 parents. My mom and my dad, my mom was a teacher, my dad's an engineer. Really a beautiful, beautiful childhood. I mean, I had friends on the street that we would always hang out with, play manhunt, you know, hide and seek, anything like that, we would play together. And I had a lot of friends growing up. I was active. I was really an academic overachiever, straight A student for my whole life, especially in elementary school. My mom was a teacher, so there was no excuse why I wouldn't have like a really good, you know, project that I would do with her, and she would always help me. But, you know, growing up with an older brother and around a lot of older kids, I was the youngest one on the block. So, you know, I always wanted to be like them. I was always the annoying little sister. And I always wanted to fit in from a very young age, where I wanted to be liked. I wanted to just really fit in, yeah, and feel part of in every way. And I think that because I was always surrounded by my brother and his friends, and my brother being like, get out, I don't want you in here with us, it made me want to fit in even more from a really young age. And that definitely plays a huge role in my story. And, you know, going through hitting middle school, same with Ian, around 7th grade, again, with some of my older friends that I made, I tried marijuana, I drank alcohol. Me and my cousin snuck it on New Year's Eve. We snuck shots and vodka in the kitchen when our parents weren't looking. And, you know, I liked it. Right off the bat, I giggled a lot. I you know, I just felt like, okay, I can do this. And then growing up, my parents had a lot of friends, and all the holidays, you know, they would get together and they'd drink. So from a young age, I saw my parents laughing. I saw them having a good time when they were drinking. So I thought alcohol equals fun. Like, that is what I thought. And, so I was like, okay, I can't wait to be older and I can have fun by drinking alcohol, you know? And so come around high school, I mean, I was captain of the varsity NJV volleyball team. I was student council president. I was in all AP classes in high school. I danced my whole life competitively and would do that. I was really engaged. I had a lot of outlets, but I still had a lot of friends that were older. I had my girlfriends in my grade, and then we had always hung out with older people who were seniors. When I was a freshman, I was going to the senior parties and, you know, playing beer pong and, you know, smoking weed, and then like lying to my parents and telling them I'm sleeping at my girlfriend's house and then not really doing that, things like that. And I really realized looking back that my brother, he was always 4 years ahead of me. So when I was in 8th grade, he was a senior in high school. He would come home drunk and be really obnoxious and really show that he was drunk. So I would literally be young and taking notes as to what not to do to get caught. So I would be like, okay, so instead of me coming home drunk and my parents knowing, I'm just not going to come home at all. And I'm going to tell them I'm sleeping over at a girl's house, or, you know, that we're just, going out to dinner and going to the movies and then coming home. And really I was going to parties and doing that. So I really learned from a young age just how to sneak around so that I never got in trouble. And I still got to look like I was the good girl to my parents. And as long as I got good grades, that meant I was, you know, functioning and a good kid. Because every time I got a good grade, it was like, oh my gosh, you're doing so well. You're working so hard. I got that validation, you know, and my parents always made me feel like I could achieve anything I put my mind to, and I didn't want to let them down. So I put a lot of heavy pressure on myself. My brother was really great at school. He was extremely naturally smart. I put a lot of pressure on myself at a very young age, and I had a lot of energy, and I didn't know, you know, I didn't have an outlet really, you know, going towards the end of high school and going into college. I stopped playing volleyball once I got to college. I'm 5'2". There was no way I was going to play on a college level. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to go away to school. I went to the University of Albany, upstate New York, and I went through a lot of drama in high school. I went through, you know, a lot of gossip and things like that. And I really couldn't wait to get out of my hometown. I was itching for it. So I was only drinking and smoking weed in high school. That was, and I don't want to say only, because a lot of people can have, you know, an alcohol and weed addiction, and that is valid and that is fine. But my story definitely gets more extreme from that. So when I got to college, I met a lot of amazing people that I chose to be my friends. A lot of people in high school, I was kind of just like around them a lot, and that's just, I didn't really have a choice. So when I got to college, I really was excited to expand my network and to meet new people and not have the same reputation, for instance, that I did in high school, not have everybody know my business all the time. It just felt like finally I can breathe. And my freshman year of college was just party. Like, I don't know how I still got good grades. I didn't know how to be a student yet in college. I never had an inclination that I would want to try harder drugs. I never thought I would do that. But when everybody else around you is doing something, it tricks you into thinking that it's not bad for you, because you're like, well, if everyone around me is doing it, then I can do it too. And I was, you know, getting better grades than a lot of my friends. And that made me think and be able to be like rationalize to myself, like, oh, look, like they might be, you know, drinking every day of the week, and so am I, but at least I'm getting A's on my tests and they're not doing that. So therefore I can function and I can do this and I can control this and I can handle this. You know, I find that I'm really good at rationalizing and minimizing things that that I don't really want to see, and I don't really want to face the truth about myself. So in college, you know, I started to explore. I started to kind of like curiosity killed the cat. Like anything someone put in front of me, I tried it. And it wasn't just me, it was the people around me too. And I think that's what's really difficult, is being able to decipher, like, do I have that predisposition, for instance, like that gene? Does it run in my family to be an alcoholic or an addict? I thought it was just like my uncle who had an alcohol problem growing up. So I was like, oh, it's not really that prevalent in my family. So I'll be okay. I'll be able to control this. Meanwhile, that's just not the truth. You know, when you're young, though, your parents don't want to tell you about, you know, things like that from your family that you look up to and you love. So there were actually like a lot more alcoholics, a lot more addicts in my family than I knew of at this time. So I was a psychology major in college. I was learning and sitting in classes and sitting in lectures about the neuroscience of addiction and learning about it as I'm literally getting addicted to painkillers and to Adderall. And, you know, it was like, as long as I can get my schoolwork done, then at night I can treat myself and I can have fun with my friends. And I started to just like learn about what was going on, but I was so good at controlling. So I wouldn't do something, you know, every single day until there was an issue with it. I would do it every now and then, even though I knew it was like kind of dangerous and I heard about it. And I would control that, make sure I felt okay, and then make sure I was getting good grades still. And then I was very meticulous with my drug use. I wasn't just like, oh my gosh, I'm going to just do this every single day. That was not the case for me whatsoever. It happened over the course of 4 years, very insidiously. I just didn't realize what was going on, and that my brain was being rewired from my own doing and my own voluntary, you know, action doing it. So, you know, by the time junior, senior year came around, I started to only really hang out with the people that were doing the same things as me, that wanted to do the same things as me, like painkillers, benzodiazepines, which is like Xanax, stuff of that nature. I had anxiety growing up. I didn't realize this. It's not just like I walk into a place and have a panic attack. It's more subtle than that. My chest would start going, my stomach would get in knots. I wouldn't be able to breathe that well. So when I found certain drugs that helped with that, I thought I would be able to control it because I was always an intellectual. I always thought, well, you know, I can outsmart this. This isn't going to outsmart me. No way. My pride and my ego would never allow that. So these things helped me at the time, but they were these temporary unhealthy solutions, right? So it might help in the moment. It might help for a month, might help for a year, but eventually you're going to kind of lose the spark that makes you you. And that's what happened to me over the course of like 4 or 5 years. I went from having this really bright, outgoing, bubbly personality to just being a little bit more in the background and more to myself, and not as social and not as like apt to want to go out and go hang out with people. Those are some huge key points that I want to highlight, is like when I started to isolate more and want to be less like communicative with my friends, I started to just like kind of think about like, oh, let me do this task and then I'll be able to do this. So I feel like a lot of us go through our week and go like, oh, on Friday night, I can't wait to go out and drink. And it's like, what is that a really healthy reward for you? You know, I believe in hard work and having a reward for that, but is alcohol and drugs the only reward that you have? It's not the healthiest. And for me, it was my downfall. And so in college, I did have like my roommates sat me down when I was a senior, and they said, Stephanie, listen, like you haven't been like around a lot. We're really concerned about you. You know, we don't know what to do. Like, can you we can tell that you're starting to do things more and more. And I just said, yeah, no, I understand. Like, don't worry, I love you guys. I just completely told them what they wanted to hear, and I kept doing what I was doing. And they acknowledged that. They saw that I was lying. They saw that I kept doing it. So they reached out to my parents. And one day, my senior year of college, a week before I was graduating, I was at my boyfriend at the time's house, who I was using with, and basically they were outside the door. They called me and said, come downstairs. And I went downstairs and they were outside and they were just like, your friends called us. They're concerned about you. You're coming home with us. And I was like, absolutely not. I have a 3.9 GPA. I've earned my spot to graduate from college and to graduate and be part of that ceremony. Little things I want to point out quick before I do that is I was already really lying to my parents about asking for money. That was a huge thing for me too. When I was in college, I was constantly asking my parents for money. It was like I would sell my textbooks as soon as I got them. You know, this was like junior, senior year though. I didn't do this necessarily in freshman and sophomore year. But the money thing became a huge problem. My dad would be like, why do you need it today? And I would come up with some insane excuse as to why I needed $200 and text him for it. And then he didn't think anything of it. All they saw was that I was happy. I was able to put that face onto them. And, you know, so they would give it to me. And I was away from home. They wanted to still support me and provide for me when I couldn't provide for myself because I was in college. So that day when they came and showed up at my boyfriend's house that day, like I said, I just manipulated my way out of it. And I said to them, look, I'm fine. Yeah, I partied in college. Didn't you guys? Like, I made it totally back on them. And I said, listen, this is the end of it. I'm graduating next week. Once I move back home with you guys, there's no way I'm going to be doing this. And I truly believe that. I thought that I was going to stop as soon as I got home from college. And it was not that easy. It turned from one thing to another. Once I got home, my parents, you know, tried their best, they were in denial for a while there. I was able to lie myself out of any situation if I really wanted to with them, and come up with a really valid, or not valid, but really creative excuse for things. And basically when I got home from college, I started to explore into harder things that really took me down. And it went from opiates to stronger than that. And it was all because of money. The things I was doing got too expensive. So then I went back down to doing just the hardest, you know, most deadly drug really there is. And from that point, like, my parents knew that something was wrong. They didn't know what to do. I would tell them, oh, don't worry, I'm stopping. Like, they would drug test me and I would fake them all the time. I started to steal things from them and pawn it and get money for it. Like, I lost myself quick after I graduated from college. I stopped hanging out with my friends from high school. I started to isolate more, and these girls were my friends since I was 5 years old. And it got really dark. My parents just didn't know what to do. My mom got to a point where she couldn't even look at me. They didn't really know. They didn't know what to do. And I don't blame them for anything. I mean, they tried their best. Like, they are the most loving people in the world. My dad was just in denial about it, and so was my mom. And it just got really bad. And basically, like, I tried to stop myself. I used other mechanisms of trying to stop. I went to therapy, but I would end up lying to my therapist and not even telling her everything. So it completely defeated the purpose. And it just got really bad where one day, and in this time period, I totaled about 3 cars in 6 months, almost died. I don't know how I didn't. My parents were just completely at their wits' end. Finally, they reached out to, one of my cousins had a friend who runs a rehab up here in New Haven in Connecticut. And I walked into my house one day being told it was my grandmother's 80th birthday brunch. And I walked into an 18-person intervention with all my closest family and friends. And everyone read a letter. It was exactly kind of what you see on intervention. We had a professional interventionist there. And I didn't know that recovery was even a thing. I thought I just had to stop using the drug and then figure out how to cope with life. And that was that. I didn't realize that it's a whole journey of, rediscovering yourself and who you are and the things you like and how to cope with life on life's terms without having to numb yourself. That was foreign to me. I didn't know that was even an option. So I went to the program. I ended up agreeing at the intervention, essentially saying, okay, fine, I want to get help. I was depleted. I was exhausted. I was a shell of myself. I did not look the way that I look on this camera right now. I just looked sunken in. I was pale. I was probably, I'm a petite girl, but I was probably 15 pounds lighter than I am now. And I agreed to get help. I wanted to live. I didn't want to die. I never wanted to die. I never, you know, was suicidal to that point. Or depressed to that point. I just really didn't know any other way, and I needed help. And I needed to admit that I needed help and humble myself with that. And the fear of being that girl in my town, the one who was popular and had all the friends, going to rehab, like that fear of me being that girl kept me from getting well for way longer than it should have. My pride kept me sick for a very long time. And, you know, when I went to detox for 9 days, and then I ended up going to a year-long treatment program, which is a lot longer than, you know, a 30, 60, 90-day program, which is usually the more standard that I know Ian was talking about, that he went to in his teenage years. But for me, I conditioned myself to want to use substances, you know, on a daily basis towards the end there. Like, that's what I was doing, like on the hour every day. I needed to learn how to rewire myself and how to cope with life. So when I went, I did the program. I worked refuge recovery, which is like a Buddhist path to recovery, and meditation became medicine for me. Being able to identify with other people who are young. I was 24 when I got sober. I had my days of partying. I did that, and I was ready to let it go. It was a grieving process to do that, but I wanted to live, point blank. I didn't want to end up dead. And I got really close, and I danced with the devil many times. And I kind of feel like I've been to hell and back, and I know Ian can agree with that. And when you do that, you basically just like embrace the light. You really do. And, you know, now I found a spiritual practice that I was raised Christian Catholic, and that's not, you know, I thought that was God. I thought that was religion. I thought that was everything. What I really learned is like my own spiritual practice and having something that's bigger than me, like a higher power, or that's what we call it in recovery a lot of time. Is just everything when it comes to not being so selfish and self-absorbed, because I thought the world revolved around me, and I had to humble myself to realize it doesn't. And I'm so grateful for the people I've met in recovery. I mean, I studied after rehab, and I got my mortgage license, and I was doing mortgage. I was a loan officer, and then I studied and got my real estate license, and I was doing real estate, and I was successful at it, and still have my real estate license active, and I still do it part-time. But I was helping girls, you know, who were coming in after me get sober at night all the time, and I loved it. It gave me purpose. It gave me passion. It was like, oh my gosh, helping people. I didn't know this is what I wanted to do, and I went for my psychology degree, but I didn't know what part or what department of psychology I wanted to go through. So life gave me and taught me, you know, what fields I wanted to work in through my own life experience. And that's nothing that a degree can teach you about. This is something that I had to go through and learn myself. And there's nothing more valuable and priceless than that education. Yes, I think it's the hardest degree you can get, but I don't regret it for a day now, actually looking back. I do regret the pain and the collateral damage that I caused for my friends and family. I definitely could have probably chosen an easier route in this life, but I think that it was, you know, I was meant to learn that experience and to be able to help bring people through now, and to realize that you don't have to stay there. You don't have to be afraid of people judging you, like what Ian was touching on. You know, it's just willing to love yourself enough to not have to numb yourself and to explore things that really excite you, to make you not want to drink and drug all the time. And I know it's hard. I know that that's like really the norm and what people do, especially in high school, for instance. And I think, you know, when you're young, you don't realize the effect that it can have on you. I know I didn't. I had no idea that would happen for me. So coming into recovery and then starting to work at Mountainside, it has just been amazing. And I'm just really grateful for this opportunity to get to talk to you guys. So thank you for listening to that. And I'm going to answer some questions that we have. So I think I did kind of answer this. Did your friends ever say anything to you or express concern? How did you react? Again, I just reacted in the sense of like, how dare you? Like, I don't have a problem. Like, how could you even say that? Like, at first it was very like defensive, but then after a while when I couldn't really lie about it anymore, it was just like, I know, I'll stop. And I kind of just would tell people like whatever they wanted to hear. That's kind of how I reacted. I would say that if you do talk to any of your friends about it, to just be really loving and come from a place of like non-judgment, and just really be like, we love you and that's why we're here, and you can talk to me, and like make them feel comfortable and not like you're being judged. Can you go into more detail about the day of the day-to-day of the recovery programs you went to? Sure. So for me, it was a lot of like therapy. So basically I would like wake up in the morning, you kind of have your breakfast with everybody. You go to an IOP group, which means intensive outpatient. So basically it's for like 4 hours during the day, and you are with a group of other people who are getting sober as well. And it's a lot of like therapeutic questions that they ask you, and like self-reflective things to do. It's kind of like a 4-hour-long therapy, but like more fun than that in a sense. I had fun in rehab actually, but and then you'll, go do yoga for a little bit. Every program is really different. So Ian, you might have, like, what did your day-to-day look like with that?
Yeah. So I went to a bunch of different programs, like I said. So like, yeah, I had been to some, like I went to one in Florida one time where like we lived in like, it was like they bought a hotel and we lived in like the motel, and they brought you in a van every day from 9 to 1. You were at the like place where you did the intensive outpatient, like on a 5-day basis. You went home not home, but back to the place where you lived in the motel for like lunchtime. And then you came back for another, like usually like activity, like either yoga or like they would let us like go play volleyball or whatever it was, like outside at that place. And that was like what some of them were like. That's what the one in Florida was like. And then usually at night they would like take you to like an AA or NA meeting or a refuge recovery meeting. And, you would go, and sometimes they would make you talk to people. You didn't have to, at different programs, they want you to do different things. So like, at that place, that's basically what the day was like. Wake up, do all those things, talk with the other people in the rehab, connect with them, see where you're at, and just have other people to talk to that are like kind of going through the same thing you're going to. Yeah, you can use the phone and you can call people. You have therapies like throughout the day. Certain days you have like, therapy with like the group of people who have that same therapist. I've been to programs like that where they like break it down into smaller groups. I've been to places where like there's 60 men in a room and we're doing a group with 60 people, and it's just a topic that a counselor throws out, and we'll sit there and you go around the room and you can talk about it if you want, and you could say pass. So yeah, there's basically like on a day-to-day basis, it's like I tell this to like a bunch of the people that I work with now, it's like a very structured schedule that they have implemented for you, because your life, at least my life, wasn't structured before. And then like getting out of those places, like the goal is to like structure your life, maybe not to every single detail that they do in those facilities, but to like a very like, structured day-to-day thing that you do, like get up, eat breakfast, take a shower, go to work, come home, shower, eat dinner, watch TV, or like whatever or go to a meeting, whatever your practice is. I believe that the structure in there gets you ready for the time that you come out.
Absolutely. I can definitely agree with that. It's kind of like living in chaos for a while there in addiction. I mean, the whole time I was addicted, I basically lived in an internal chaos and an external chaos. So having that structure of people kind of telling me what to do, that's living in a healthy way, was like absolutely pivotal for me and imperative for me. What would you both say to your younger self now looking back? I would say to myself, I would really just be like, validate yourself and love yourself enough, where you don't have to look out like outwardly for that. I think that for me, a lot of my addiction felt like I just went through, I was always seeking this outside external validation, and I couldn't validate myself. I couldn't love myself. And I do think that a lot of my addiction was like really numbing that and really numbing some of the pain that I felt when it came to just a lot of grief that I went through with losing certain family members when I did. And it just really, I don't know, I just really wish I loved myself and validated myself. And I really feel like that keeps me going in recovery, is finding that level of self-love for myself. What about you, Ian?
I would honestly probably say you're about to go through a very whirlwind of things in your life, but it's all going to be worth it, because honestly, I wouldn't change my life. I don't feel like I would be motivated how I am now if I didn't get to the places that I were at. I don't want to be someone who just settles for what it is. I want to keep growing. Like, I don't want to stay like this. I want to keep growing on a daily basis. So like, I would probably just say you're about to go through a lot of unfamiliar times, and it might get very uncomfortable, but in the end, it's going to be worth it. And that's for me, that's it.
How has COVID-19 affected your clients and individuals you help? Great question. Yeah. All these questions are great. It's a hard time. I mean, meetings aren't as in person anymore, which is really difficult because it's really about, the opposite of addiction is connection, because we just isolate so much in addiction. So the fact that that connection component wasn't there for some of the clients was really it's just difficult for them. Ian, you want to hit on that point more so you can elaborate when it comes to it?
Yeah, I mean, not even just clients. I feel like just like people in general. Like, I talk about this with people all the time, right? Like, you removed basically everybody's like day-to-day structure. So when you do that in someone's life, it's kind of like, okay, now I don't have anything to either distract myself or keep me structured, right? So like, either the people that had never had the chance to kind of look at themselves because they were just so busy with everything going on in their life that they were forced to do that because they were home quarantining. And at that point, maybe they started to use drugs and alcohol more, or especially alcohol, since it's so easily acceptable. And that resulted in a lot more people wanting help during that time. So like, I mean, during the middle of we don't even really know what the middle of COVID is, to be honest, but like during the summer, like in July, I had like the most clients that I've ever had. And like, that's because people were like, kind of like, okay, maybe they were doing it for a couple months and they wanted like help now. But yeah, with what Stephanie was talking about, I know that, that connection is super big, right? Like, even during everything during COVID, like, I'm personally a person who needs to have that one-on-one connection with my clients. So if they're in like a driving range and not in another state, then I will make the effort to like go see them and us either like go on a hike or go on a walk and like kind of like get outside and do those things, because like, I mean, they're not seeing anybody else. So it's like, even if they're just seeing me, it's someone that is an example of someone who's living a recovery lifestyle, and they have been able to see like, okay, if this person can make it through it, like, why can't I? And like, that was like my experience too. Like, I saw that other people could make it through it, and wow, so why couldn't I? So
I think that ties right into the next question, which is like, as we head into the winter and possibly more extreme lockdowns and people will be home and bored, do you have any suggestions for those struggling with addiction or maybe leaning towards using a substance? Definitely. So as Ian kind of just touched upon, get outside. It might be winter out, but do something in the like snow activity of some sort. If that's even difficult, depending on your location or depending on the weather, then just connecting with friends over the phone, virtually, picking up a new hobby. I had a friend who literally started to knit blankets while in quarantine, and she had no idea that she was going to be extremely skilled at it. And it's like picking up new hobbies and seeing like, what's something I really want to try, and trying it. And instead of just being like, well, I don't know what to do even with my hands right now because we're in quarantine for a week, try something new, push yourself to pick up new hobbies and connect. Don't isolate, because then we feel alone. And we just nobody likes to feel alone. So try to connect, try to get outside, pick up a new hobby, try cooking, self-care a lot. Don't go, I know it's easy if we're not going out and seeing anybody to go a day without a shower. No, take a shower every day, keep up with your self-care. Really important. Still do your nails if you're a female or male, go for it. And if you anything like that, keep up with your self-care is a huge tip that I definitely want to give. Do you think education or more education on drugs, alcohol while in school would have made an impact or deter you from using when you were young? I actually have a funny story with us. So DARE program was going on when I was in school. And in 5th grade, everybody in my grade had to write an essay about how they won't do drugs or what they learned about in DARE, right? So I actually won. My essay got picked that year in 5th grade. And what I had to do, because my essay got picked, was read it in front of my whole class on stage. And the last sentence I had in that essay was like, I know for a fact that I will never do drugs. It's crazy thinking about that. I remember that moment very, very, very clearly. So, not to bash Jer in any way, but I do think, like, me and Ian both, like, I, in my first year of recovery especially, went to high schools and shared my story in assemblies. And the amount of wonderful feedback and students that would come up to me after and actually ask questions about it and saw some of themselves in my story, still reach out and still say, like, hey, thank you for that day. I was able to really see that, like, I was having a problem or could have steamrolled more. And we didn't have people really come in that, like, talk to us like that. Like, what I was taught was, like, oh, the egg in the frying pan analogy of, like, this is your brain on drugs. And if frying in a pan, like, that didn't help me to learn. It just, the fear factor and, like, instilling fear isn't going to work. You have to really, like, say, like, this is going to be something that is going to come up for you. But, like, here are the things to be conscious of and to look out for, which is, like, the early manipulation, the early lying around it. How much are you hiding it already? Things like that. And, like, are you doing it more than your friends around you? Are you doing it alone? There's a lot of things to look for with that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I don't think it would have deterred me from using, but I feel like, the more education people have, the better. I'm super big on that. Like, us going into, like, schools and even us just doing this and, like, for kids to see it, like, in high school or wherever, like, I'm hoping that it'll help somebody. So, I definitely don't think it would have deterred me, but I think that it definitely would have made me feel more comfortable to come to somebody. And if I had a problem and I wanted help, like, I feel like it would have been like, okay, like, people are coming here and they're talking about this. So obviously these people have been through it. So, like, if I don't know what else to do and I was willing enough to come and want help, right, then I would have been like, okay, like, I know where to go. Just like how you were talking about, like, you didn't really know that there was, like, recovery possible until that happened. So, like, I mean, I don't have an excuse. I knew. So
do you think TV shows, documentaries, etc., accurately depict addiction? I would say over the last, like, 2 to 3 years, I've been seeing some documentaries come out, especially on Netflix, et cetera, that really do capture it. Sometimes, though, it always is still, like, right in a really, bad area, and it's, like, the street part of it. And yes, that is part of addiction. Like, I never thought I would be, in some of the places I was when I was doing things. But I really think that maybe the more recent movies and TV shows and documentaries are definitely grasping it better than maybe some that were from 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, I mean, what's that show we were watching? The Recovery High School?
Yes.
Yeah, so, like, that was a show that I started watching, like, the recovery. It was like a recovery high school. It was, like, on MTV, and it's, like, a whole school of people being in recovery. And it really shows you, like, the day-to-day activity of these people and, their families and, like, how, like, everything can be somewhat normal at times and then not be normal. So, yeah, that's anybody? Oh, yeah, some more.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for allowing us to feel comfortable to, just be vulnerable and share this. And if you guys have any questions or concerns, maybe for a loved one, or just want to educate yourselves, you can please reach out to Liz, and she would be able to provide you with our email addresses, and we'd be able to directly answer any questions that you had. So Liz, if you want to hop back on.
Great. Thank you. I can't thank you enough, both of you, for sharing your personal stories, because it's truly only through continuing to have open and honest conversations about substance abuse and addiction, and hearing these stories with the hope that someone out there who's hearing it is going to be able to connect to it, is the only way that we can protect one another and even potentially, save a life. And I love what you just said. I don't know which one of you it was when you were answering the question about education. And, it's so much like at the Alliance for Safe Kids for years, we have said, you know what, you can't wag your finger and say, no, 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 don't do it. Like the egg in the frying pan. You have to educate and empower people. And, that's what we have always tried to do. Again, sharing, being honest with our youth, telling the adults, the parents and caregivers to keep their eyes wide open. Like you shared some red flags and signs that, I'm sure someone in the audience is going to take away, is going to keep that, on file. And if they ever, come across something, then they will know, your voices will resonate. So I really can't thank you both enough. And I just want to say that I'm so happy to look at these shiny, happy faces, that you're healthy and thriving, and that you're, paying it forward. And that's just a beautiful thing. And I would also just like to say that Mountainside offers amazing programs. Like back in March, we were looking for a lot of virtual opportunities to share with the community. And I was blown away at how many things were probably already in place, but I just wasn't aware of all of them. But you have made so many things available virtually. And so I would really, recommend anyone listening to that you visit the Mountainside website for some further information, as well as their offerings. So again, thank you so much. Did you want to say something, Stephanie?
Yeah, we just want to add, there is a young people support group at 6:30 on Wednesdays that you can access virtually from our website. So if you go to mountainside.com, you click on offerings, go down to virtual support groups, you can choose. There's the family support group on Wednesdays as well. There's the young people's on Wednesdays at 6:30, and every day at 6:30 we have a peer support virtual group. So anybody who may have an issue or just wants to relate and see people and learn and educate yourself on it, and then also share and have a safe space, we, the recovery coaches, facilitate them. So it would be a way to see us again and answer any questions you can. And it's a really safe space. So I just wanted to broadcast that as well.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And in addition, if anyone has any questions, after the webinar ends, as Stephanie mentioned, you may reach out to me. My email is liz@allianceforsafekids.org, and I will be able to put you in touch with either Stephanie or Ian. So thank you both again so very much. And before we say goodnight, I'd just like to remind everyone that they will be receiving an email with a recording of the webinar, and then the webinar will be available on the Ask website. So if there's anyone out there that you feel would benefit from listening to Stephanie and Ian's stories, you may refer them there. In addition, in that email will be a registration link to Ask's #WalkTheTalk, which is our virtual walk, fundraising walk that's been going on this month. And if you haven't done so far, I would encourage you to register, create a team, support a team by making a donation, and in turn supporting the Alliance for Safe Kids. So I really appreciate everyone that took the time to be here tonight. And thank you all so very much again. And I wish you all and your families good health. Good night.
Good night.